Welcome to my full Louboutin Legit Check guide. This guide is for anyone who wants to sit down, focus, and within 1 hour become an expert at authenticating Louboutins. By the end, you will be able to spot a fake instantly. This is the condensed version of my 4-part course. So instead of spending an hour and a half watching 4 videos, you can knock out the entire course in 1 hour and in 1 video. I do have this chaptered out, so if you already saw one of the other episodes, you can just skip that section and move on to the next. Before you click buy on those pre-loved red bottoms, watch my entire series first. My whole goal with this series is just to help you shop safely on the pre-loved marketplace and not get scammed. The quickest way to identify a fake is not looking at the shoes, it's looking at all the stuff that comes with it. Great example is the authenticity card. It is a well-known fact that Louboutin does not include authenticity cards with his shoes. So if you're looking at a listing and you see there's an authenticity card, you already know it's fake. With every listing, you want to start out looking at the stuff that comes with the shoe before you spend all that time and effort analyzing the shoe. Because people are trying to make fakes of a designer shoe, they're going to focus most of their effort into trying to make that shoe look perfect. And a lot of times they overlook the stuff that comes with the shoe. The box, the dust bag, the paperwork that comes with it, even the tissue paper. Louboutin has a specific type of tissue paper that he uses in his shoes. Those are things that are really easy for someone making a fake to overlook because they're so focused on making the shoe look as accurate as possible. We're going to start out by doing an unboxing of a newer pair of shoes and an older pair. We're going to start out by going over the similarities because these are the things that should be consistently the same no matter how old the shoe. Number one is going to be the color of the box. It's always this cardboard color. When you look at the box up close, you will see that there are horizontal lines. If they're vertical, it's probably a fake.
This side is always horizontal, the longer side, and then shorter edges are actually vertical because they match the top of the box. So the top of the box is going horizontal and then the lines go straight down, if that makes sense. 99.9% of the boxes out there are going to look just like this. We did find one authentic example of a very, very old style boot, and this one was a little bit different. It looks like they just kept the lines horizontal on the sides, but the top, you can see the top was still horizontal, the lines were not vertical, so always look at that top lid, make sure it is horizontal.
The next thing you want to look at is the actual color of the lines. It should be this very muted cardboard color. It's just slightly darker than the box. What that means is up close, of course, you're going to see the lines. But if you're looking at a box from across the room, you're not going to notice the lines because it's such a muted color. If you are holding the box back or looking at it from across the room and you can see the lines, it's probably a fake. And the interior should be white. It is always white. Now the only caveat is if it's a limited edition shoe, then the box will be a limited edition. And I'm going to show you a picture right here so you can see what I'm talking about. So that's the only caveat, is if it's a special limited edition shoe. But if that's the case, it will be very easy to authenticate that shoe because it is a limited edition. There's going to be tons of photos of it online. After that, you're going to look at the side of the lid and you're going to look for the Louboutin signature. It should be dead center in the middle. It should not be off-centered at all. You'll notice that the older box has the Louboutin and then the newer box actually says Christian Louboutin. They're both going to have signatures in the middle of the box, but the older style, it's just slanted a little bit. It's a lot thicker than this newer style. And then the Paris is always in the right hand corner. The newer boxes, the signature is straight in the middle instead of slanted. And then you're going to actually see the Paris right underneath the signature. The number one trick that I do to authenticate a box is I actually run my fingers over it. So the writing is such high quality embossment that you can feel the texture. You can feel the difference. You don't even need to look at the box. You can just feel it. It's right there. I have boxes from 15 years ago. They're exactly the same.
Now, some boxes, you're going to feel the texture more than others. I know this one, I can feel it pretty good, even though it's thin. This box, I can feel it really good, but mostly just right here. So it's not super raised right in here, but there should be some spot along the signature that you can actually feel. The ones on the left are older, and then the ones on the right are newer. The two on the left, they're basically the same, at least as far as the Christian Louboutin signature is the same. It's the same thickness, same style. The Paris is also the same thickness and same font. The only difference is that because this box was a little bit bigger, the Paris actually seems to come up a little bit farther. When you look at it though, you realize that the Paris is the exact same distance away from the signature on this box as it is on this one. If you're looking at one of these older style boxes and you're not sure whether or not it is authentic, measure the distance between the Paris and the signature. I found out from going through all of my old pairs of shoes that the Paris is the exact same distance from the signature on every single box. So you'll measure the edge of the signature, and then you're going to measure all the way down to the top left corner of the P in Paris. And you should end up with 70 millimeters, give or take a couple of millimeters, or approximately 7 centimeters. Or if you're measuring in inches, it should be close to 2 3/4 inches. These two are newer. As you can see, this one is the same style as these two. It's just a little bit thinner. And then finally we have the newest box, which is the most different. The signature is straight, it's not slanted, and then the Paris is a lot smaller and underneath the signature.
I'm going to go over what I look for in the signature to verify that it's authentic, because you can use this on almost every Louboutin signature. If you look for these things on the box signature, it should be the same on the insole, and on the red bottoms, at least the current style, it should be the same. You're going to start out by looking at the L, and you want to make sure that there's that point up here. Then you're going to go down here and make sure that the L almost touches itself. So it comes down here and it almost connects. Then look at the L and look at how it flows. It should flow from thin to thick, thin to thick, thin to thick, thin to thick. That needs to be consistent. No matter how old the box, that is still consistent. So that kind of flow between thin to thick on the L. The Christian part is going to be smaller than the rest of the signature. And then you're going to go down and look at the O's. So the O's, there's always this little loop-de-loop. So there's kind of like a big O and then a little O. That is consistent on everything. Always look for that O. Then the first U, the two sides are going to be the same height, but on the second U, the left side is going to be taller than the right side. Then look at the T, and this little cross right here should go evenly from thin to thick. Finally, the N has that little curvy tail. Now, as terrifying as this is going to sound, it is very easy to purchase an authentic Louboutin box. They actually sell them on Poshmark and eBay. So even if you've gone through the steps and you know that the box is authentic, you still have to verify that the shoes match the box. That is why the sticker is so important, to verify that the sticker matches up with the shoe. We're going to look at stickers from the past 10 to 15 years. These ones on the right are all newer, and then these ones on the left are all older. The only thing I'm looking at is this main sticker right here. This is the one that comes with the shoes from Louboutin. Look at the sticker closely and just make sure that it doesn't look photocopied. For example, you can definitely see the difference between these two. This one, you can't even read the signature. So now that you've looked at the sticker, you can see that it was printed on well. Then you're going to want to make sure that it fits the style. All of these have one line of information that's bold, one line that's not bold. Then they have this little box that has a number, a QR code, the size of the shoe, and then on the newer ones, there's an extra code right here. This code is simply missing on older styles. So if there are newer shoes, you're going to expect to see either a W51 or a W53. So you're going to verify that this is all accurate, it's in the right format, it's a good quality sticker, and then you're going to go in and actually look at the information and make sure it matches up to the shoes in the box. And to do that, we're going to look at the first two lines. lines. The first line is always style name, heel height, material. And then the second line is the color code and the name of the color. There's two things you're going to do. First, you're going to go through that first line and make sure that this matches up to the shoe. So make sure it's a Hot Chick, 100 millimeters, and Napa. If it's a Hot Chick 100 and then it's patent, I would definitely look at that shoe because there's a good chance that's not really a Hot Chick. Then look up the color code. It's a red flag if the color code doesn't match the actual shoes in that box. On the newer stickers, the Christian Louboutin signature is slanted and it's inside this black box. You can see that there's kind of a white border, and then you're going to see the top of the L touches up here, and then it touches down here in the corner, and then it almost touches the middle right here. Older shoes are basically the same. The main difference is that although the L still touches up here and it kind of touches in this corner, it may actually touch the center of the box right here. Now the other style is this style right here, and this is the one that doesn't have the black box. It's going to have a line here that's separating the information, and then it will have the Louboutin signature on the left hand side. If you notice, the Louboutin signature actually matches the top of the newest boxes. I would expect to see this on newer styles because the signature does match the lid on the box, but it's straight, it's got the pairs underneath it, and then it kind of follows a similar pattern. So you've got larger font up here, and it will have style name and the heel height. Then beneath that is actually going to be the material, so this is patent, and then beneath that is going to be the color. They took the color code and they put it down here above the QR code. Depending on which store you bought them from, they had different stickers that were put on the boxes. So this is authentic. These are authentic too because these are just from the store. So that's Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, etc. So if you see those extra stickers, that's totally fine. We're going to look at one from 2008 so you can see the difference. The armadillo, this is a very popular style from 2008-2009. Instead of touching right in the corner and then not touching here, it touches just off the corner and then it touches right in the center over here. The font is a little bit different. You can tell with the size, but then also looking up here. Neither one of these are bold like they are over here. But other than that, it follows the same pattern. So you have the style, heel height, material, and then the color code, and then the color name. There's just an extra space in between these two. And that's pretty much the biggest differences between those old stickers and the newer ones. Louboutin will never, ever, ever put an authentication card in the box. So if you see an authentication card, run. Report that listing and run because it is a fake. You will oftentimes see this little card that says love your red soles, and that is authentic. Any paperwork that comes with your shoes is gonna be very high quality and it's gonna have crisp writing. Nothing should be smudged at all. This card in particular is very weighty. It's a very thick card. Think of like the really expensive business cards. It's basically like cardstock. What you need to do is you will see little red symbols in the corners and you'll see a red symbol on the back. And other paperwork will have that red symbol as well. What you need to do, run your finger over the red symbol. You can see that symbol itself is engraved and it's painted red. So you can feel the texture. It will be even more obvious with the symbol on the back. It's not really engraved, but painted, and so you can feel the texture as well. And it should be like that with any paperwork that you get that has this little red symbol. You should be able to feel the texture on it. With one of my shoes, I did get another little envelope here. On the back of the envelope was another symbol that you can feel. And then once you open it up, there's a card that again had that symbol that you can feel. You can actually see the texture on it right here. And then on the back of the card, this is what it said. Now we're gonna look at the dust bags. As you can see, they are a little bit different. First, you're gonna make sure that there's heel taps, and if they are, the heel tap bag should match whatever dust bag is in that box. So if it's a red dust bag, it should be the red heel taps, and then of course if it's the white, then it should be the white. The heel tap bag is just a smaller version of the dust bag. So looking at the dust bags, you can see they are the same size. This one is red with black writing, of course, and this is white with red writing. And the signature, you can see on both of them, the signature is very, very crisp. The other thing you can do is similar with the box. You can run your fingers over the texture on either one of these and you're going to be able to feel it. You can feel the difference in texture between the writing and the back. So that's pretty much where the similarities end. So the red bag is going to be a lot thicker than the white bag. It's also going to be a very soft, kind of a felt velvety material. White, on the other hand, it's a little bit thinner, and then it's more of like a canvas material, so it's a little bit rougher. I believe the reason he went to the white bags was because the red bags can tend to bleed red onto your shoes over time if you store them in here. So even though these ones seem so much nicer, this one's actually better to store your shoes. So looking at the shoes, you can see that they're packed very similarly. All of my older ones have this basic white tissue paper surrounding the shoe. Not a bright white, it's more like an off-white color, but nothing fancy, just basic white tissue. However, on newer shoes, you may actually see this fancy little tissue paper that has these CL initials. Now, we're gonna look at this tissue paper in the toe box. You may end up having a shoe tree in there to kind of push the tissue paper up.
Inside the shoe should be the very soft, luxurious, thick, sort of like a fancy Kleenex type of tissue that is stuffed into the front part of the shoe. The older style tissue paper that's in the shoe is the exact same style that is in the newer one.
Remember, this one is 10 to 15 years older than this one, but the tissue paper is the same. When you compare them to each other, they don't look like anything special, right? They just look like basic white tissue paper. But if you compare them with regular tissue paper, this is regular tissue paper, this is Louboutin tissue paper. Look at the difference. This one looks so bright white compared to this one. This is going to be cream, off-white sort of color. Then when you look at the quality, this one, it's very crumply, it's kind of see-through, it just looks like cheap Walmart paper. But this one is super duper duper soft. It is very thick. This is like the fanciest Kleenex you could ever possibly imagine. Like if the Queen of England were to use Kleenex, she would use this. That's how fancy this is. It's just such a difference in person when you see the quality of the Louboutin tissue paper over regular.
It's definitely possible that you may see non-Louboutin tissue because it's possible the seller got rid of the original tissue paper and maybe is trying to stuff it again before they ship it to you. So if you see this tissue paper, it doesn't 100% mean that that shoe is a fake, but if it has the authentic Louboutin tissue paper, that's a really good indicator that the shoe may actually be authentic. So that's why we look at the tissue paper.
Material should be high quality. Everything on the shoes should be perfect. The material should be smooth. Any lines such as the stitching should curve perfectly with the shoe. It should be straight. For example, the stitching in the back needs to be straight. The curves of the shoe should be perfect. They should be elegant. The stitching is barely noticeable, so it doesn't take away from the look of this shoe. The insole to me feels very soft and luxurious. So we have perfect arches, perfect angle. The toe box in particular, I've seen a lot of fakes and it seems like they'll start thin here and then they'll get kind of like thicker right here. So you want to look at the toe box and make sure that everything flows seamlessly and there isn't a part of the toe box that looks clunky or too fat compared to the rest of it. The sole of the shoe should look very thin from the side. It should be barely noticeable. The whole point of having this very thin leather sole is just to not take away from the profile of the shoe. Again, there should be no weird bulges or anything like that in the actual shape of the shoe. Let's talk about the quality of the material. There's three main types of leather that Louboutin uses in his pumps. There's the patent, there's the embossed, and then there's the Napa. So when you're looking at Louboutin patent, it should be a very smooth mirror-like finish. You can see looking at this one just how beautiful and mirror-like it is. It is perfectly smooth, it is shiny, but it's not too shiny, it's not cheap shiny. So there's kind of this ripply ocean wave texture when you look up close at the shoe under light. We'll get more familiar with what that texture looks like in the third video. But I did notice that when you look up close at patent specifically, you can see that same texture that you would expect to see on the red bottoms. You'll notice when you're looking at embossed that there's always some sort of a pattern. It's going to be this hard shell over Napa material. What you want to just take note of is this pattern should be very neat. This one just happens to have lines through it, which makes it even easier because you can tell that the lines are super straight. But even with other types of patterns, you'll just notice how detailed the actual pattern is on the embossed leather, and that's what you're going to look for. Now this one is Napa, and look at the texture up close. Focus on the texture and the pattern of the texture. I feel like this pattern is very unique to Louboutin. When you look at the insole, it's also very similar to Napa and it has a similar pattern to it.
This is just for your awareness for when you're analyzing a listing. Take note of the Louboutin heel taps. And the reason for this is that if you're looking at a shoe and it looks brand new, it has never been worn, but the heel tap is not a Louboutin heel tap, that is a red flag. If it's a brand new shoe, it should have a Louboutin heel tap. Now, if it's worn, it's definitely possible that they had to replace the heel taps at some point, so they may look a little different. Louboutin heel taps should always be perfectly straight in line with a stiletto, and basically they just add length to the stiletto and to the profile. So you can see each one of these, none of the heel taps are bigger than the stiletto. They're all very, very tiny. This is the dolly, and it kind of comes in and then it flares out a little bit. You can see that the heel tap is still perfectly in line with the stiletto. This is an example of a non-Louboutin heel tap on a pair of Louboutins. It's just a tiny little bit bigger right here. So the original one went straight down and this one's just a little bit bigger. So keep that in mind. It's on the Preloved marketplace. You may see a heel tap that you immediately recognize as a non-Louboutin heel tap. And if that's the case, you just want to make sure that the shoe actually looks like it's been worn. Here's a comparison of authentic hot chicks and a pair of fake hot chicks. And you can see right off the bat that the heel tap is too big for the shoe. These of course are new, so again it's a red flag because you can tell that this is a non-Louboutin heel tap on a pair of shoes that is brand new. These ones you can see other things such as the differences in the curve here versus over here. But like I said, that was another red flag for me, just that heel tap being too big for the shoe.
So the insole has been pretty similar over the past 10 to 15 years until now. So they're all going to kind of look like this. They were a little bit thicker and a little bit different on the pre-2007 era, but I'm going to show you pictures of those in a second. But it should look like this. The number one thing you want to look for is the spacing. The spacing should be about this far. The main thing I would do to ensure that the spacing is correct in between the Christian Louboutin signature and the Paris is I would actually measure between the very bottom of that signature and the top of the P in Paris. Now, I don't want to say this is 100% always the same, but I have had at least 20 pairs of shoes, all from different eras over the past 15 years. I've measured every single pair, and the distance between the signature and the Paris is always between 34 to 35 millimeters. Here you can see in this one as well, it's close to 35 millimeters. This is a really simple and easy way to identify whether or not the shoes are authentic by measuring the distance between the signature and the Paris on the. Now, I'll caveat this by saying I have not measured shoes that are not my size. So I wear between 37 and 37 and a half, and those are the only sizes that I've measured. I'm pretty sure the same, but it is possible if you have like a size 40, maybe there's a little bit more of a distance. I don't know. If you already have Louboutins at home, you can go through and measure for your size and just make sure that they all have the same distance, because they should. The other thing you can do is, if you know the style of shoe that you're looking at, you can go online, look at authentic pictures, maybe on the Louboutin website or something like that. Look at authentic pictures of that shoe. Just verify that the distance between the Louboutin signature and the Paris. This is a great example because this one is definitely a fake. One of the most obvious things was the distance between the signature and the Paris. It's just way too short on the fake. So the number one thing you can look for, no matter what the era of shoe, is that you want the signature and the Paris to look like gold embossed foil. You can kind of see the gold embossed foil look right here. So you want to look for that. It should have that foil look about it. It should not be smudged or anything like that. Let's look at the insole. As you can see, the signature is the same. All the things that we've been discussing that will help you identify whether or not the signature is authentic on the top of the box or the red bottoms, it applies here as well. So pointed top, almost touches right here, smaller, tighter, double O, higher, lower, smaller to larger, and then that curvy little tail. The writing should not be crooked or off center at all. The writing should look like embossed or engraved gold foil. You can see how shiny it is right here when you zoom in. It looks very much like gold foil. The writing should never be blurry or smudged or too thick. So I'm going to show you an example right here. This is an authentic pair that has been worn to death. You can see it's faded, but it's not super smudged. It just looks like it's faded. You can still see a defined outline of the actual signature. And then here you can see that embossed gold foil look. And then you can see it down here as well in the Paris. This fake one, the signature is way off. And then the Paris and stuff is too thick. And even though this is a very bad quality photo, you can tell that this is shiny, but it doesn't look like gold foil. Now, in general, the Paris will always be kind of this thin writing, but we're gonna look at an older pair because it's a little bit different. So if the shoes are older, the insole may have a slightly thicker signature or Paris. So keep that in mind if you're looking at older styles, is that they may have a slightly different signature and in general just maybe a little bit thicker. But other than that, it's the same. It's still got that embossed foil look about it. And so that should be the number one thing you look at, is whether or not it looks like gold foil. The other thing is you can look at the signature and you notice that it still follows most of the identifying factors that we've been discussing. It's very, very similar, just a little bit thicker, and make sure that the writing on the shoe looks like embossed gold foil.
99% of the writing out there is going to be gold. There are some limited edition colors. So for example, this one is silver, but you can tell it still has that foil look about it, even though this is silver and not gold. It very, very, very much still looks like embossed or engraved foil. So that texture is something that you always want to look for in the writing. This is the same. It doesn't matter if it was a model from last year or a model from 15, 20 years ago.
Here's another example of real versus fake. I wanted to show this because some styles of insole will have foil instead of the typical cream leather. And so it looks a little different. But even if it's got this foil on the insole, the writing should be crisp and clean and clear. You can see over here it's not. It's the tail is too thick right here. T is barely even there. This is all smudged in. The thickness is wrong all over. Paris looks so smudged, it almost looks like it's out of focus. One of the top things you can look at is actually the stitching. The stitching on Louboutins should be impeccable, perfect, completely straight, blends well with the curves around the shoe. It should be very small and tight so as not to take away from the look of the shoe. It almost looks like it's one line. When you're looking at the stitching, even the interior stitching is a perfect straight line. Here's a picture of the interior stitching, and you can see even on the interior just how perfect the stitching is. When you look up close, you can see there's little individual stitches, but they are so tight that they do almost look like one line around the shoe. You can see here, the stitching is so tiny and so tight, it almost looks like a single line. The stitching curves perfectly around the shoe. Here's what it looks like up close, and you can see just how tight that stitching is. Now, besides the stitching all around the shoe, there is a specific stitch that I look for on the back of the heels. I'm surprised I actually haven't heard more people mention it. But with all the shoes I've had, with all the pumps, there's always this specific stitching pattern, and that is this double stitch. So we have the main stitching line here, and then right underneath it is a second stitch, and it's just a short little line. Like I said, all of the pumps I've ever owned have that double stitch. So I immediately look for it, and the fake pair of Louboutins I bought didn't have it. And I didn't know at the time. I hadn't noticed the double stitch, so I didn't know to look for it. So you can see we've got the main stitching line, and then we've got this little second stitch right here, kind of a double stitch is what I call it.
And then this is the inside of the shoe where you can see that double stitch as well. That double stitch can be right underneath that first main stitching line. Here it is right here, right underneath it. Or it can be a lot lower, so it could be as far down as this one is. This one's pretty low as well. And then this is a lot lower. So look for that double stitch. Let's zoom in again real quick. So you got the main stitching line that is super tight. Look at how perfectly in line it is with the embossed leather. And then you got the little stitch here and then that second stitching line. Again here, perfectly tight stitches, and you got that little stitch into the second stitching line and then little stitch back up. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that this double stitch rule primarily applies to pumps. Now it may be on other styles, definitely. I would not be surprised to see it on other styles, but if you have an open toe shoe, it's possible that this double stitch on the back of the heel won't be there, even though it does have a heel and you would think logically that it would be there. I've just noticed that a lot of the open toe don't have it. An example would be that 2008, 2009 armadillo style. It definitely didn't have it, but it was a different style altogether. The back had different layers of leather, so that was kind of a little bit different. Now this double stitch, it is on 99.9% of pumps. I've had at least 20 pumps and they've all had this double stitch. I did notice that for whatever reason, the Sporty Kate did not have it. Now the Sporty Kate is a little bit different of a design. It's got like this extra lip of material, so maybe that's why, I don't know. But that's the only style that I noticed did not have the double stitch. But in general, 99.9% of the Louboutin pumps will have that double stitch. So I immediately look for it now when I'm looking to purchase a pair of shoes off the Preloved marketplace, just to make sure that they are authentic. It's a very, very, very good sign if it's there. Again, not 100% a deal breaker. It's possible shoes in the 90s, didn't have it. There may be a unique style out there that didn't have it, but the majority of the time, that double stitch is gonna be there. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's like a half vertical stitch in the back of the heel as well. This one, I see it a lot on Louboutins. I do have a couple of pairs where it's really, really, really hard to see. So if you're having a hard time seeing that stitch, it's not for sure that they're fake. It's just a good sign if it's there. I have seen fakes try to replicate that stitch, that little half vertical stitch, and they end up being really crooked. So these two are very obvious. You can definitely see the stitching line. This one, barely. It's right here, but you can barely see it. This one, it's super hard to see. So if you have a pair of shoes and you don't see a prominent stitching line, don't be completely alarmed. It still may be real, but if you do see that stitching line and it's perfectly straight in the middle of the shoe, that's a good sign. Like I've said, even some of mine, it's so hard to see that it would be easy to miss, and you really have to look for it. So if you have a pair of shoes and it doesn't have that half vertical stitch, you're still going to want to go through the checklist just to identify whether or not there's anything else that doesn't match up. But if that vertical half stitch is there, very good sign that the shoes may be authentic. Unless, of course, the stitch is crooked, and then in that case, that is a deal breaker and that shoe is fake, because Louboutin does not do crooked stitching. When you think of Louboutin, you always think of the iconic red bottoms, but the truth is, not all real Louboutins have the exact same red sole. Here's an example of how the color has changed over the years. You can see that the older pair right here is slightly warmer than the newer pair over here. That is because the color has actually changed over the years. If you're looking at an older pair of Louboutins and you think the color is just a little bit different than current styles, that's okay. Now, if it's a current style and the color looks off, definitely deal breaker, that's a fake, move on. But if it's an older pair, it's highly possible that the red bottoms are just a slightly different hue than that current Chinese red color that we're all used to seeing. The
texture is really important to be able to identify because that has actually been consistent over the years. So if you can identify Louboutin texture on current styles, you can identify it on older vintage Vero Cuoio styles as well. You're gonna look at the red bottoms. This is what brand new looks like. It should be beautiful, shiny, glossy Chinese red. It's hard to tell right here, but I'm going to show you a close-up. But when you look up close under the light, the texture, it should look similar to ocean waves. Again, from a distance, it's gonna look like glass. Basically, it's like wet red nail polish, which is, you know, how the red bottoms got started to begin with. But when you look at it up close under light, you're gonna see a little bit of texture. And to me, that texture reminds me of ocean waves. So it's like being out on a boat and you look out over the ocean and you see the sun shining across the waves. That's what it reminds me of. That is the leather. That's proof that the red bottoms are actually leather and not plastic. If they're plastic, it will probably look more like sand, like grainy, matte sand. So keep that in mind. Before I even look at the writing on the red bottoms, I look at the texture to make sure that it has that ripply ocean wave effect.
If they're fake, they may also have lines in the red bottoms. For example, this one over here, looking up close, you can see that there are horizontal lines and it looks sort of matte. So that's a dead giveaway right there that those are fake. This one is a dead giveaway because the size is a sticker. The size should never be a sticker. It should always be engraved. But when you look up closer at the texture, you can see that there's vertical lines as well.
Now I'm going to show you on the screen what the red bottoms will look like with wear. If you wear them around the house, they're going to have kind of little indentations, unless you have carpet. If you have carpet, they may actually still look new. But if you have hard floors, like I have marble tile, then my shoes always have little indentations in the paint. Then when I wear them out for a day, you will start to see that red paint chip away and reveal the raw beige leather underneath. Sometimes before it gets to the raw leather, it does look a little bit black, but you should be able to see some sort of small areas of the beige leather. It always concerns me when there's too much black on the shoe and you don't see any of that beige leather. Then when you've been wearing them for weeks, then the whole shoe will look like that raw leather color. If you have a pair of shoes and they look like they've been worn a lot and they're still the original red bottoms, make sure they look like this. Make sure they don't still look red because that could mean that they're plastic. If you're purchasing a half size, make sure that instead of saying like 37.5, it says 37 and a half, so 1/2. That's very important because there are fakes out there that are half sizes, and a lot of times you'll see them and they will put a 0.5 instead of the 1/2 symbol. If you see this little symbol, this is the symbol for a custom made pair of Louboutins. So this symbol is authentic.
So you're going to want to verify whether or not the signature on your red bottoms matches one of these.
There's actually two styles of signatures that I would say are current. They're both very similar, they're just slightly different.
The major difference is in the I and the N. So the I right here, you can see it's got a very pronounced dash instead of a dot. This one is still a dash, but it's not as pronounced, so it almost looks like a dot. Then if you look at the N at that little curvy tail, this tail stays the same width. This tail gets thin at the very end. That's the main differences in both of these signatures. You can also see if you look at the L, they're both pointed. This one is just a little bit thicker here and a little bit thinner down here. And then this one goes thick to thin, but it's not as dramatic. Now, other than those differences, the rest of the signature is going to follow the exact same rules that we use to authenticate the signature on the box lids. Going from top to bottom, the Christian part of Christian is smaller, tighter, and more deeply engraved. Both L's have that little point at the top. Both of them almost touch back on themselves right here. Both have this little cat eye shape. The tails are slightly different, with this one not getting as thin up here as it does on this side. You can see the tail kind of follows a similar pattern where it gets a little bit more thin in the tail on this one, and then it's less noticeably thin on this one, so it's just less dramatic. But they both still follow the same pattern. It goes thin to thick, thin to thick, thin to thick to thin to thick. The O's are all double O's. So you'll see the big O and then this little O. So it's got a little loop-de-loop.
right here. We have the big O, we have the little o. And again here, big O, little o, big O, little o. The first U looks pretty normal, but on the second U, the left side is going to be higher than the right. And it's the same here. We have same size, but then this one is higher and then lower. And then the T, that cross, is going to go from thin to thick, thin to thick. And then, of course, the N always has a little tail.
And the other thing you want to note is that the Made in Italy is 3 separate words. There's always a little bit of a space in between the words. This is important because I feel like a lot of fakes out there will run the Made in Italy together to where it looks like it's one whole word.
Now this next tip will really only help if you have a half size, but if you notice the 2 on the half sizes is different. So this 2 is all curved, so it curves down and then goes like this. And this one, it has kind of a little shelf right here, so it curves and then it goes straight, and then it goes kind of straight down and then straight out like that. Now, if you happen to have a 37.5, I did note that the half size that has that curve 2 also has a little bit of a curve in the 7. So it's 37 with a curve. Whereas the signature that has the half size where the 2 has straighter edges, the 7 is perfectly straight. So there's no curve in the 7. So we are finally to the Vero Cuoio stamps. This is super important because so many fakes try to put that Vero Cuoio stamp to justify as to why the signature doesn't match up. There's actually 3 styles of Vero Cuoio stamps that I'm going to show you, but this style right here is the most different. It does have a tiny little tip right here, but it's not very prominent, so it's not very obvious like with the newer signatures. It does almost touch back here though. Then it goes thin to thick again, and then this kind of stays the same, and then it goes thin to thick and thin. The one thing that is the same, that is universal, is that the Christian part is smaller and tighter and more deeply engraved. The other thing that's the same is the O. The O has that little double O, and then right here, another little double O. The U, although it's not as dramatic, this left side is still taller than the right, even though it's not as dramatic as on the newer styles. And then the N, of course, still has a curvy tail. On this style, that is so much more different than the newer ones, the I has a dot.
Now you'll notice a big difference is the T. The cross part in the T doesn't go from thin to thick. It's just the same thickness all the way through.
The other thing that's the same is the Made in Italy. There is a space in between the words. So if you see a Vero Cuoio stamp and the Made in Italy is one line, there's no space, it's probably a fake. The other thing to note is the O's on the Vero Cuoio. They're not circles. They're kind of more oval shape and they are straighter on the sides, like you took a round O and squeezed it. This is another style of Vero Cuoio and it's very similar, but the signature is closer to what we're seeing nowadays. You can see with all of these, I know this one's kind of blurry, but you can see with these that the point is now more prominent and then it does come back and almost touch itself right here. Again, the Christian part is smaller, tighter, and more deeply engraved. It's got the double O's right here. It's got a little dash over the I, and then it's got that curve right here. And again, with the Vero Cuoio stamp, the O is more oval shape. It's not a circle. Here's what I call the double Vero Cuoio stamp. So instead of just having this symbol, it's also got this one and then this one right here. This one, if you notice, on all of these stamps, the signature looks really similar to one of the current signatures. So it looks just like the signature where the N does not get thinner up here. You can see looking at these two, they're almost identical. We've got the point up here on all of them. We've got the L nearly coming back and touching itself. We've got the Christian part that is smaller, tighter, and more deeply engraved. We have the double O's. That second U is taller on the left than the right. The T is smaller on this side, then it gets bigger on that cross. And then, of course, the N's have a tail. And this N, you'll notice, looks almost exactly like this one. That's why I say this signature looks almost identical to this one. And again, Made in Italy is 3 separate words. Here's some fake one. Right off the back, look at the O's. They're all circles. None of them are oval shaped. This one, the Made in Italy, looks like one word. This one, and this one don't have the point at the top. They're basically circles and they don't touch back on themselves. The B's, I'm really not sure what those B's are, but they're not the same B's that the Louboutin signature has. This one, you can see it's just this one circle. It's not the double O. Same here. All three of these are missing that curvy tail. You can see that the Christian part is not deeply engraved enough. It's almost the same engravement as the signature right here, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be deeper. It's also hard to tell in the photo, but the font is off as well. And then of course, Louboutin does not put stickers or his sizes.
What you're going to do to authenticate them is first you're going to want to go to the red bottoms and you're going to be looking at the texture. So you want to make sure that it has that mirror-like finish, and then you're going to want to look up close and see if it has that ripply ocean wave texture. If they've been resold, that definitely sucks, but you can still look at the red bottoms right here and look for the same thing. So look for that mirror-like finish and that ripply ocean wave texture, because this should still be authentic. Then you want to go to the writing on the red bottoms and see if it matches up with one of the 3 examples in this video. If the writing doesn't match up to one of the examples in this video, that's not a good sign, but it's still possible that they are authentic. I only put examples in this video that I was able to 100% authenticate with my research. So it's possible that there were other authentic signatures. If it doesn't match up to one of the examples in this video, you still want to look at the writing and see how many indicators are there that it is real. So the first thing I would do is go straight to the Vero Cuoio stamp and look at the O's and make sure that they are the oval shape O's and they're not round like circles. Then you want to go to the Made in Italy and make sure that the Made in Italy is 3 separate words. Both of these things are consistent throughout all of the Vero Cuoio examples, and the Made in Italy was the same no matter what style, no matter what era. Made in Italy is always 3 separate words. Then if that checks out, go to the Christian part of Christian and just make sure that it looks smaller and more deeply engraved than the rest of the signature. After that, I would look at the O's and see if the O's are double O's, because that was also consistent no matter what the era. And finally, I would look at the N and make sure it has that little curvy tail. After that, I would go straight to the writing on the insole. Most likely it's not going to be exactly the same as current style, so that's okay. You just want to look and make sure that it has that gold foil texture, because that was consistent across the board. And then you can look at the writing and just make sure that it's crisp and clear and that nothing is blurry or smudged. Even if these are older shoes that have been worn a lot, you should still see a defined outline of the wording, even though it may be really, really faded, kind of like the example that I showed you in the previous episode. The final thing I would do is I would try to see if I could find proof of the style of shoe. So you could just look up whatever characteristics you notice on the shoe and see if you can find an example. So for this one, nude Napa with black lace pattern Louboutin, and then go through all the images and see if you can find an example. If you find an example that matches up to your shoe, that's fantastic, because not only does it give you the style name, but then it allows you to look at the shoe and compare it to the photos of an authentic pair of Louboutins and just see if everything matches up and nothing looks off. If you can authenticate the texture on the red bottoms and you can authenticate the stamping, meaning that it is the same as one of the stamps in this video, that's a really good sign. If the stamping is a little different and you still think it may be authentic, you really need to find proof of the existence of that style of shoe before you purchase, just to keep yourself safe. I definitely would not risk it. I would not buy those shoes. Let's bust some common myths. Myth number 1, half sizes can't be faked. This is 100% not true. The fakes that I purchased were a 37.5, so half sizes can definitely be faked. Now, it is definitely true that I see more full sizes that are fake than half sizes, but I've seen at least 50 fakes that are half sizes in the past year, so it definitely happens. And this is actually true not only pumps, but I've even seen sneakers and other styles of Louboutins that are faked that are half sizes. Myth number 2 is that the red bottoms on fakes can't be leather. I would say 90% of the time they're plastic or some sort of material that's not leather, but I have seen fakes that were actually leather. So long story short is if you are looking at a pair of shoes and you can tell that the red bottoms are real leather, that's a great sign. Highly likely that they're real, but you're still going to want to run through the checklist and look at all the other indicators before you determine whether or not they are real, because it's still possible that they could be fake. The third myth is that fakes are priced really low, to the point where you almost suspect them because of the price. This is 100% not true. 90% of the fakes that I've seen are priced as if they were real. Most are priced between $400 and $700. So you definitely cannot look at the price to judge whether or not the shoe is fake. In contrast, myth number 4 is that real Louboutins are always priced high. More often than not, they are priced appropriately for that shoe, but I've actually seen some Louboutins that are priced extremely low, to the point where you're like, are these fake? There's no way that the seller is willing to get rid of this shoe for that price. For example, I bought a pair of Hot Chick 130s for $200. They're a very rare shoe, and the fact that a seller was willing to get rid of it for $200 seems insane. In this case, it was a guy trying to sell them for a friend, and the guy didn't know anything about Louboutins. He honestly didn't care. He was just trying to get rid of them. So that does happen. Occasionally, you can get a great deal on a pair of Louboutins from a seller that just is trying to get rid of them. Myth number 5 is that sellers who have sold fakes in the past have negative feedback. I look for fakes in the Preloved marketplace almost every single day. And if I'm being honest, I still have not found a single seller that is selling fakes and also had negative feedback, identifying them as someone who sold fakes. You would think logically that if someone bought a fake, that they would right away automatically go write negative feedback for that seller. But what if you're stuck in a situation where you're still trying to get your money back? That's what happened to me. I hate to admit that I didn't leave negative feedback for the seller that sold me fakes. When I got them and I realized they were fake, it was a nightmare trying to get my money back. At first, the seller was sticking to the lie that they were real, and so it was a back and forth between eBay and me and the seller. Then when they finally accepted the return, I of course wanted to wait until they received the return and I got my money back before I left feedback, because I didn't want anything to risk me getting my money back. 2 days before the shoes were scheduled to be delivered to the seller, they went in and tried to put a hold on my return, claiming that they hadn't received them yet, basically trying to accuse me of scamming them. Fortunately, I had a lot of proof that I had shipped the shoes. Not only did I have the tracking information, but I had photo and video evidence of me packing up the shoes and taking them to the post office. But even with all of that evidence, I had to wait weeks before eBay would lift the hold. By the time all of this is said and done, the window had passed for me to leave feedback. I fully believe that this was the seller's plan. I'm sure they've done this before. It was so calculated, the timing, it was kind of ironic. If you as a buyer did not take photos and have evidence that you mailed these shoes back, that seller would get to keep your money. If that didn't work, like in my case, and they still had to give me the money back, it still worked in their favor because it made the process so drawn out where I couldn't leave negative feedback without risking the seller doing something else and then me having a harder time getting my money back. Just remember that story. It happens all the time. If you do buy fakes, definitely take video, photos, everything, proof that you ship them back. I'm not the only person this has happened to. I guarantee this has happened to a lot of people. So a lot of times you're not going to see negative feedback on that seller because of all those things. The last myth is that Preloved marketplace apps such as eBay and Poshmark will remove fake listings. They won't. They will not remove them. I actually submitted photographic evidence of an authentic pair of that specific style of Louboutins against the fake on the listing, and they still did not remove the listing. So a couple of additional tips. Number one, don't purchase the shoes if you can't verify the style name. This is really important. You should be able at some point to figure out the style of the shoe, and if you can't, that means it's a good chance that it's fake, so I would not even risk it. The second tip is do not purchase from sellers who are unwilling to send you additional photos of those areas that you need to authenticate the shoe. The photos is the most important, because if you can't 100% authenticate that shoe, there's no point in buying it. And if the seller is serious about selling the shoe, they should be willing to give you additional photos, period. Likewise, if you have a question about the shoe, like you want to know the width or the insole length or something like that, the seller should be able to tell you that. If they physically have the shoe there, they should take the extra 2 minutes to answer whatever questions you have. If the seller is unwilling to even communicate with you, you're probably going to have issues, whether it's them taking a month to ship them, or maybe they misrepresented the condition of the shoe. Maybe the shoe they're saying is brand new and it ends up being worn. I've actually had that happen to me. For me personally, I will not purchase from a seller who is just unwilling or doesn't care enough to communicate with me. And that would be my recommendation to all of you. Another tip, and it's more of just something you need to note, is that if you're shopping on Poshmark specifically, if the shoes sell for $500 or more, they will automatically get rerouted to a Poshmark authentication center to be reviewed before they ship them to the buyer. If the seller knows they're selling fakes, there's a good chance that they are willing to accept a lower price than $500, so they don't have to risk that the authentication center identifies them as fakes. Just keep that in mind. If you're getting red flags already with the listing or the seller, if it's close to $500, like $550, $600, listings never go for full value on Poshmark, so you know that they're actually expecting to sell the shoe for under $500, so they miss that mark. On the flip side, I personally do not trust Poshmark's authentication center. I've heard very bad horror stories about them authenticating ones that were fake and then deeming ones that were authentic fake, and there's not much you can do about that. So if you buy a pair of shoes and the authentication center deems them authentic, still check out the shoes when you get them. Take a good look before you start wearing them around, just to make sure that they actually are authentic, because it happens. It definitely happens. I always say the devil is in the details, and it's those little details like that that can help you identify a fake within seconds. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience buying fakes. These fakes were extremely well done. At the time I purchased them, I knew nothing about Louboutins. On top of that, there was no extensive guide like this to help me out. With that said, I was still able to identify that they were fake. And so I think this is going to give you a little more confidence that you can do it too. There were 10 red flags that I missed. The first red flag was that I couldn't figure out the style of the shoe, and it didn't even come with a box. Normally when there's a box, at least you can see the style name, you can look that up and see if it matches up to the shoe. Kind of look like a Fifi, Filet, maybe a Mercy Allen, maybe a Dolly. But every time I compared it to photos of those styles, there was always something that was off. Maybe the curve of the heel wasn't exactly right, or maybe the toe box was just a little bit different. There was always something that didn't add up, so I knew it wasn't one of those styles. And that should have been a red flag to me right off the bat. The other thing was that these were supposed to be older worn shoes, but they looked brand stinking new. When I got the shoes in person, I realized that this red part right here looked like it was freshly painted. It was almost too vivid, too bold. Number 3, of course, is that they had been resold. That took away my ability to authenticate them by the wear on the red bottoms. At the time, I thought the signature on the red bottoms looked legit. It was super close. One of the closest fake signatures I've ever seen. Afterwards, when I was looking at photos of the red bottoms from the listing, and then I was looking at photos of authentic Louboutins, I realized that the L was off. The L did have a point, and it did almost touch itself on the back, but the point was not pointed enough. It was a little bit off when you're looking at the current style signatures. And this was not a Vero Cuoio stamped Louboutin, so there's no reason why it shouldn't match one of of those signatures. The thickness was off. It just didn't flow correctly, the thin to thick, thin to thick. At the time, of course, I didn't know that. It looked close enough to me. There's really no way I would have known. It's just now, after doing all this research for a year and building the class, that I realized that the signature was in fact off. Also, the stitching was wrong. Of course, again, I didn't know at the time what Louboutin stitching looked like, but it was missing that double stitch in the back of the heel. 99% of Louboutin pumps have that double stitch. And then it also didn't have the vertical half stitch, which is not a deal breaker, but it's still a red flag. When I got the shoes in person, these shoes were almost too glossy, and it was kind of ripply too. When you looked up close, you could see it was very, very ripply around the whole shoe, so they weren't smooth. And then when I tried on the shoes, one of the heel taps actually disintegrated, literally just fell apart. This should not happen. And then the 9th red flag was that when I tried on the shoes, I couldn't feel the hug. Louboutin leather is such high quality, it almost feels like it's hugging your feet. It's different than being tight. It's not just tight, it literally feels like it's hugging your feet, especially when you try them on and you wear them for 10 to 20 minutes and they kind of warm up and begin to mold to your feet, because eventually you're going to break them in and they're going to fit like a glove on your feet. And I couldn't feel that sensation with these shoes. The other thing that told me that they were fake was when I initially tried on the shoe, they actually almost felt too tight. I almost couldn't even get my feet into them. So I wore them around for a few minutes and all of a sudden I realized that they weren't tight anymore. In fact, they were too big, where I was almost falling out of the shoe. There is no way you should go from having a shoe that you can't even jam your foot into to 5 minutes later having to be so loose that you're falling out of it. This part right here, the leather was starting to come up and wasn't holding its shape like it's supposed to. The fact that I couldn't feel the hug when I tried on the shoes, and then the fact that these shoes could not even hold their own shape or form, told me that this was definitely not Louboutin leather, period. There was no doubt in my mind. Alright guys, you are officially experts at authenticating your own Louboutins. Don't forget, if you need help in the future, you can always download the Louboutin Legit Check guide in the description, or you can head on over to Reddit and ask for help in our Louboutin Legit Check community. Happy hunting for your dream pair of red bottoms!